Okay, well, welcome to Linux Music One. This week we're going to look at Sonic Visualizer. It will, at least for me, it's very helpful to get a view of what my sounds sound like, what my sounds are doing in terms of frequency, and it's also got a little acoustic or music theory stuck on this week, so stick with me and let's get started. Okay, well, let's get started. I think we all take it as given that if we have a pluck string, vibrating column of air, what that really does is it puts vibrations in the air that then come and hit your eardrum and you hear that sound, and it's a specific vibration. Right here, what I have is a sine wave I've created, and it's 220 hertz, and I've brought it into Sonic Visualizer, which is a tool we're going to work with this week, and it's really good at exploring sounds and trying to figure out why they sound the way they do. So if you look here, here's the amplitude, and I can move the wave back and forth. I can zoom in and out as necessary. Here, same thing, only what this does is it actually reads the frequency. And here's the frequency. Again, notice down here, here's the whole wave, and I can slide that back and forth to wherever I'd like. But this says, and it gives me information about that. It says this is, if you look at it, it says the peak frequency, 219.999. Let's call it 220, because that's what I thought I made, which is an A note. And notice that it's red. And what Sonic Visualizer does is it portrays these sounds with the relative heat. Like if I had a complex waveform, which we'll explore in a minute, with lots of different sounds going on, the hottest ones, the warmest ones, the highest volume frequencies would be in red, and it moves down to blue as it cools off as the frequencies get quieter, and you'll see that here in a second. So take a second, look at this, what it tells me. I've highlighted my red main frequency of 220, and it tells me, here's a spread, and by the way, that's an A. Second octave, et cetera, et cetera. It's minus 6 dB, and that's going to be important because what I want to do is as I explore more complex sounds, I want to say, okay, well, this has 220 and it's minus 6, and maybe it's got a 330 that's minus 10, and et cetera, et cetera. So not only will it give us a color indication, it'll give us a specific numeric indication of how loud that sound is in the mix. And if I so let's take a look at that. If a string vibrates, and let's say at 110 hertz, 110 vibrations per second, we call that an A. But what's actually happening when that string vibrates, or that air column vibrates, or that bell, the reed in a saxophone, whatever it would be, as it vibrates, it pushes the air at 110, but it also pushes the air at 220 as it mixes with the pushes the compressed air that it had before, and 330 and 440 and 550 and 660 and on up. And it's always integer multiples, whole number multiples, 110 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5. So notice that 110 times 2 is an A note. Also, doubling a frequency is always an octave. And if I came up here, 330, as it turns out, that's a fifth above an A. And 440, again, is a doubling of 220. That's an octave. 550 is, 554 is a third. But we would call, don't get me into just intonation right now. We don't want to go there, but 550 is effectively a third. And if you've studied music at all, you might notice that fundamental, a fifth, and a third make a major chord. 660 would be an E, a doubling of 330, and on up. But the thing that's most important, at least I think for this session, to notice is that these are all integer multiples, whole number multiples of the basic frequency that we've plucked, we've blown, whatever we've done. So here, like I said, a clear pulse of 220, and it doesn't sound like much. It's boring. It doesn't sound like a musical instrument. So let's look at a bell. And notice here I have this is a bell tone I recorded, and I've zoomed in, and here's the hot frequency. It looks like it's somewhere 570 to 597, and if I go up to the next thing, the next partial that's running, notice it's up in the 1500 range. It's the 3 times. So this one has multiples of 2 times the 500, but they're very, very quiet. They're canceling out. We're not hearing them. What we're hearing is the original fundamental and the, looks like the third. And if I come up here, that's 445. So that's probably, 9 times, 8 times, whatever. So we're hearing various partials, and that's what makes a bell sound like a bell. Would be a fundamental, no second partial, no second in the harmonic series, is how we talk about that. A third, and up here, a stronger eighth or whatever that is, up to make that bell sound. And if I look at something maybe more complex than a bell, because a bell's a pretty clean sound, here's a saxophone. And notice a saxophone here, if I come over to Sonic Visualizer and say, tell me about it. I have a bass frequency. Looks like 145 to 156. 290, so that is a doubling. That looks like a tripling, and so you can see it's got a lot of partials coming up here. And notice the relative weight of them. It looks completely different than a bell, completely different than a sine. Well, everything looks different than a computer-generated sine because it doesn't have any partials. But here, the fundamental, no second, you got a third. Here, pretty strong fundamental, pretty strong second, real strong third, and on up and on up. And if we look at a dobro, that's actually a pretty complex instrument. It's got metal strings, the metal cone resonator in the middle, wood, et cetera, et cetera. Boy, it is really, look at this. Here's the fundamental, the second on up. It's got all kinds of overtones and partials going on in it. And what we do in synthesizers when we try to create sounds from scratch is, if you wanted something kind of dobro-ish sounding, you might say, what partials do I have? And how strong are they? And how can I make my instrument more complex? If I look at that, where was that picture? I deleted it. But we use our filters to filter out the things that we don't want. So we might take white noise, or let's talk about a saw wave. A saw wave is very interesting, and you see in synthesis, a lot of people, instead of using pulse waves, use saw waves, simply because every integer multiple is in there, and then they filter out the ones they don't want. So that's what I want to leave you with, Sonic Visualizer. The frequencies, zoom in, zoom out. Look at the sounds you're trying to create, match, get close to, and play with them in your synthesizer. That's that. I hope this is a takeaway. It's a little bit about music, a little bit about acoustic theory. But the interesting thing is, take any sound, slam it into Sonic Visualizer. Go see, what does that look like. Look how complex that looks. Look at this one. Let's zoom in a little bit. That's a pretty yeah, you see the pulses, but look at all the little things going on in there. And so take Sonic Visualizer, look at some waveforms, make some sounds in a synth, bring them back into here. See what they look compared to another sound. And that's that. So I hope this was in some way instructional, and it's very, very basic as far as music theory, but I hope it's handy to you. And check out your sonic visualizer, and we'll see you next time. Okay, well, I hope there was at least something in there that's useful to you. Maybe not all of it, but something. Otherwise, if your stuff doesn't act like my stuff, check your versions here, and well, you know what comes next. Roll up your sleeves, go to these websites. Actually, the Sonic Visualizer has a lot of help on plugins and the things you can do with it that's far more than what we've covered here. So get on your system, look it up, play with it a little bit, and I'll see you next week.